Hi there, me again. Today's video is going to be big surprise, film photography related. And if you've kind of been watching my channel and the videos that I've been posting for a while, you know that I've been traveling a lot and just kind of doing a lot of film photography and just kind of experimenting with the medium. And I wanted to talk today about a lens that I have actually grown to really love and has become my most used and favorite budget film photography lens. And that is the Jupiter 12. So here we are talking about the Jupiter 12. This is it, and it's a very tiny lens, as you can see. But the reason I got this lens was because I have a Canon P rangefinder, and this is a Leica thread mount camera. And I really just wanted to get a lens for each of the frame lines that are in the viewfinder. And I didn't really want to spend a lot of money at first because you have to pay for film, and you have to pay for developing, and you have to buy a scanner if you want to do stuff yourself. So I really wanted to save money on lenses. I didn't want to buy really expensive options. And this Jupiter 12 was a very nice budget option in the 35mm focal length. Now, for pretty much as long as I've been doing photography, I've been pretty comfortable with the 50mm focal length. But once I started doing film again, it really kind of just changed the way I shot and the way I looked at scenes and the types of things I wanted to photograph. And I needed a wider perspective. So 35 was definitely the way to go because it's the widest you can go on this camera and still frame through the viewfinder. But yeah, I landed on the Jupiter 12, and honestly, I really, really like it. But it does have some quirks. So let's talk a little bit about the Jupiter 12 and its history and just kind of what it is optically. So the Jupiter 12 is a Russian-made Zeiss Biogon copy that was produced from, I think, about 1947 all the way into the early 90s. So had a long production run. It's not as common as some of the other Russian lenses like the Helios 44-2, but still very long production run, and you can find them pretty easily online. So this lens is a 35mm f2.8 lens with a 5-bladed aperture, and being the Zeiss Biogon copy that it has the same 6 elements in 4 groups design that the Biogon has, and I believe it's called a retrofocal design. So the front element of the lens is pretty far back, and it's kind of got this sort of built-in lens hood in the front. And then the rear element is very bulbous and sticks far back into the camera. So depending on the camera you're using this with, you may or may not have some problems. I believe the Voigtlander Bessa cameras you cannot use this with because it'll run into the shutter curtain. So definitely want to check out the camera you're using and see if it's compatible with this if you're looking for this as your budget 35mm option. So apart from the Voigtlander Bessa cameras and the couple other cameras that this lens just straight up doesn't work on, it's actually a pretty versatile lens, and you can use it on quite a few different bodies because it came in 2 different mounts. It came in L39 or Leica thread mount, like this lens that I have is, and it also came in Kiev or Contax mount. So you've got a couple different mount options. This lens is also rangefinder coupled, so that's very good if you plan on using this with a rangefinder camera. But you can use this with an M body. If you just get a L39 to M mount adapter, you can use this on, say, a Leica M6, like the Mac Daddy of film Jason at Grainy Days did for a while on his channel. So let's talk about some potential negatives and just a couple things that I kind of don't like about this lens. The first glaring thing about any Russian lens, not just this, but any Russian lens from this era, is the build quality is varied based on the time it was made or the factory it was made at. So you're kind of playing Russian roulette a little bit with these lenses. But really, I've bought quite a few Russian lenses just on eBay, and I've had pretty good luck with all of them. So Definitely, I think it's worth the shot because you're not paying very much for these lenses. But yeah, it is a little bit of a risk. These lenses were made for a very long time, and I do believe there was a sweet spot in production in terms of build quality and optical coatings and stuff like that. And I think mine falls into that category. My lens is from 1978, and you can tell that by the serial number. But I think the lenses from the 70s are kind of the best all-around lenses. They're the most durable, they're the most well-built, the most well put together, and the optical coatings are really interesting. It's got this really loud purple and orange coating. It looks like it's multi-coated, but I'm not sure that's the case. But it was a long production run in the late 50s, early 60s. I believe they made a silver version of this lens, which I've heard is sometimes better than these, sometimes worse. So it's kind of a gamble, and I think you have the best luck typically with lenses from the 70s. So aside from the build quality, there's just a couple little nitpicky sort of things that I don't like about this lens. One, there's no focusing tab, and that's because of the design of the lens. The front is the part that spins, so it's kind of hard to have a focusing tab like that's on most rangefinder lenses. But it would be nice, and the real reason that I don't like the fact that there's no focusing tab is the lens is very short. So when I go to focus, sometimes I won't take my hands off the lens and I'll get a little bit of my finger in the frame and it kind of looks like a lens flare or something. But yeah, having a focusing tab would alleviate that and it would make focusing a little bit faster and easier to dial in. The second thing I don't really like about this lens, but it is kind of quirky and interesting, is the aperture ring is on the front. So you literally have to put your fingers on the front of the lens and turn it to mess with your aperture, which means it kind of slows you down because you have to look at the front of the lens, you have to turn it over and look at what aperture you're setting. It doesn't really matter for me because I typically shoot pretty slow anyways, and if I'm doing street photography, I usually just set the aperture and I don't change it that much, so it's not that big a deal. If you're planning on using this for video and doing a lot of video work with it, you're not really going to be able to change your aperture and make use of the clickless aperture during filming because your fingers would get in the way. But that being said, you also can adapt this to digital mirrorless cameras and it'll work just fine. The last thing I don't really like about this lens is even though it's kind of got a built-in lens hood, it does flare. And I can't really use a lens hood because of the aperture ring on the front. So if I put a lens hood, or if you're wanting to use larger filters and adapt them to this lens, you're not really going to be able to change your aperture because you're screwing it into the aperture ring and the front of the lens can't turn all the way to its minimum focusing distance if you have something screwed in there. So kind of annoying, but it's not a super big deal. So now let's talk about the things I do like about this lens. And the first thing that I have to talk about is the size. This lens is so small and so compact, it's almost like a pancake lens, and it makes this Canon P almost pocketable, which makes carrying it around a breeze, and I don't even notice the camera when I'm not using it. And that's always a really nice benefit to a lens like this. So let's talk about optics and optical quality. I can't really vouch for the production run of this lens as a whole, but I would imagine the lenses built around the same time as this one have similar characteristics because they probably have similar coatings, were built at the same factory, have the same build quality, etc. So what I can say about this lens specifically is it's pretty sharp. Now, granted, I shoot a lot of my film photos at f5.6, f8, f11, so sharpness isn't really an issue at those apertures really with any lens. And f2.8, f4, they are a little bit softer on the sides, but it's not distracting and it's really not that big of an issue, at least with this one specifically. And I think it renders the colors really well and maybe slightly warm, which I personally prefer. The final thing I like about this lens is it's a budget lens. I think I got this lens for $65 on eBay. I think they've gone up a little bit, but you can find these lenses pretty easily anywhere from $80 to $120. And honestly, if you've got a rangefinder and you really want a 35mm focal length and you don't want to spend an arm and a leg, I think this is a great option. I wouldn't worry too much about the price because I've honestly taken some of my favorite ever film photos with this camera and lens combination, and I'm glad I didn't spend a whole bunch of money to do it. So, with that being said, that's about it for this video. The last thing I want to do is, if you've used this lens before on any camera, doesn't matter what camera, I'd love to know the details about the lens, if it's a black or silver version, what the production date is on it, and what camera you've used it on. Because I just want to kind of make a comprehensive list of all the combinations that work and don't work, and that way if anybody's looking to buy this lens, they can look at the list and be a little bit more comfortable with their buying decision. But yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely make sure to let me know what you think of this lens if you've used it before, and make sure to subscribe if you enjoy photography, video, just kind of general creative related content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.